Thank you for listening to this worship podcast of St. Andrew Lutheran Church. We hope this recording provides you with a moment of God's grace wherever this finds you. Know that you're welcome to join us in person for worship in Eden Prairie on Sunday mornings at 9 or 10:30. And also know that any contribution you make will bolster St. Andrew's ministry and outreach, including our podcasting directly to you. You can do so online. Welcome and God's blessings to you.
We are glad that you are joining us today. My name is Shauna Berg. I'm the Director of Children, Youth, and Family Ministry here at St. Andrew. In addition to this being part of our Holy Week services, we also are celebrating First Communion for many of our young people here tonight. So it's a very special night for many of them. I'd like to invite the children that are celebrating their First Communion just to come up here just for a moment so that we can recognize them and so you can see all of them just for a moment. You'll notice as they're coming up here that they are wearing stoles that they made as part of our First Communion class. They are wearing those so that you can see these young people and know which ones this evening are celebrating tonight. And so that after the service, you can take a moment to congratulate them and to celebrate with them. So I want you to just right now, before the service starts, to give them a little round of applause to congratulate them. Reading tonight comes from the book of Belonging, a feast with friends. The air felt heavy and expectant, as if the room were holding its breath. Yeshua, Jesus, sat at the table with his friends, chatting quietly in the glow of the candles. Passover was usually a lively holiday for remembering and celebrating how God rescued God's people from Egypt's power machine. The city swelled with people and parties. There were stories, songs, and cheer. But this year, in this room, it felt different. Jesus stood with bread in hand. His friends waited for him to recite the traditional Passover words, but he surprised them all. Instead, he said a blessing, broke the bread, and handed it to them, saying, "This is like my body. Soon it's going to break." Lifting his cup, Jesus went on, "And this is like my blood. Soon it's going to pour out." His friends were sad and confused. Breaking bodies, pouring blood? Passover was supposed to be fun, a time to celebrate rescue and freedom. They didn't understand yet that in his own way, Jesus was celebrating rescue and freedom. Something new was happening that only Jesus understood. Just like the escape from Egypt so many centuries before, God was going to lead people to freedom and belong with them in a new way. Jesus understood that this was something worth celebrating. Yet, in some mysterious way, the suffering of Jesus' human body was going to be part of the rescue story. Like a mother who labors and cries when she gives birth, Jesus was about to bring forth something new, and it was going to hurt. Jesus understood that this was something worth honoring. When you break bread and sip wine, when you sit back from the table with a full heart and feel something of heaven in your gathering, remember me, Jesus told them. Sometimes things happen that are so important and mysterious that we simply can't fit them into our human heads and hearts. They weigh us down like big, heavy stones as we puzzle and wrestle. And it helps to do something with our hands and our time to give those big feelings a place to rest. And we call that a ceremony. Jesus was giving his friends the gift of a remembering ceremony before they even knew they would need it. Something was about to happen that would change the world forever. It would confuse and inspire humans for the rest of history. Jesus didn't give his friends an explanation or a lesson. He gave them a ceremony, a place to put their sadness, confusion, doubt, awe, and gratitude. Jesus looked around the table at his friends. Oh, how he loved them fiercely, and he would love them right up till the end. He was making a love promise to his friends, one that he wanted them to remember in their gatherings. Remember to remember to remember. Like Moses sending God's people into the promised land, Jesus was getting his disciples ready to live in a new type of world, a rescued world, a world without him. Jesus had one last meal with his dear friends, and he spent it in the most important way, reminding them of the truest and most beautiful things. Love one another, he said as he washed their feet like a servant. The way you love and care for one another will show people that you love me. He hugged them and reminded them of all he had taught, saying, if you love me, you'll follow my teachings. I belong with you, and you belong with me. You're my beloved. You're a delight. Be a blessing. Take courage. Choose life and flourishing. He said new things as well, things that warmed their hearts and wonder. I'm going away soon. I'm going to prepare a new place for you with God, and I'll come back to welcome you there, but I would never leave you alone. I'm sending a special comforter to you that will remind you of your true names and give you power to live in God's kingdom. Like all special nights, time stretched out in order to make space for all the important words that needed to be said. The candlelight flickered and dimmed. The shadows grew long, full of feast, full of fondness, expectation, and mystery. Jesus' friends leaned back in their chairs, cups were tilted, voices raised as they sang one last song together. Then out into the night, they walked together to wait and pray. Wait for what? Only Jesus seemed to know. Here ends the reading.
Well, grace and peace be with all of you this evening, and a special welcome to all of our young people receiving their first communion tonight. We're so glad you are here. So, I was given the dishes that you see on this table on the photo above from my husband's grandmother, Grandma Verna. She lived to be almost 105 years old. Now, the pattern that you see was made popular in 1941. It's Franciscan ware. And every time we went to her house, these dishes would be set out for a holiday or when family gathered. And they would be put out for the family, and she made more food than we could possibly ever eat. And if we did not go home with leftovers, she considered it a failure. 4 generations of the Scar family would gather around her table for conversations and laughter and tell old family stories that have been passed down for generations, like what part of Norway they were all from and where they set up their homestead in North Dakota when they arrived in the United States, and shared the first churches that they helped build and be part of. Through these stories, everyone around the table felt like they belonged and they felt like they were a part of these stories. Well, Jesus does the same thing with his disciples. As Shauna read tonight in the story, the night before Jesus dies, he gathers his disciples together around the table to eat copious amounts of food while they retell the story of how God's people gathered together for a meal as God passed over their homes and kept them safe before they were released from slavery. Well, First Communion students, you will soon gather around this table right here. And that's what this is. It is a table, it is a meal table that you see. And you'll gather around it with Pastor Matthew, and he will share Jesus's words with you. And these words were said by Jesus, and they have been said for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, right? With people all around a table. For more than 2,000 years, the same words have been said. This story is about how Jesus takes ordinary bread and ordinary wine and he blesses it at the Passover meal and he does something new with it. And Jesus said to his followers that every time that they would gather and they would have this meal together, that his love and his presence would be with them. And this is how he cared for his friends. He shared this meal with everyone at the table, even the people who were not kind to him. This meal was about belonging and it was about forgiveness. You know, stories are really powerful. As we just heard Shauna read, stories bring people together and we can see ourselves in these stories. We are all here tonight because someone in our lives shared the story of Jesus having a meal with his disciples. That's why we are here. And I bet all of you First Communion students that I bet Shauna also shared this story with you, and Arlene shared this story with you, and Pastor Matthew and Pastor Peter shared it with you. I'm sure that they did. And this story is part of a bigger story that is told this week. Tonight, we remember when Jesus had his last meal and prayed with his disciples. Tomorrow, we will remember when he's arrested and dies on the cross. And then on Sunday, we will remember when we find out that love is stronger, stronger than death. And it is why Christians all over the world are gathering tonight and tomorrow and Sunday. So, how wonderful it is that people share stories with us. Well, I want to show you a picture of Nizreen. So this is Nizreen, and she's pictured here with two of her children. Bashira is her son, and Natalie is her daughter, and they live in Beit Jala, and they work in Bethlehem. The other kid in this picture is my daughter, Anna. And they all took care of Anna and opened their homes to Anna when she lived and worked in Bethlehem. Nizreen is a Palestinian Christian, and she also shares the story of Jesus' Last Supper with her children. And here's the thing. She not only shares this story with her children, but she shared it with my daughter, Anna, and she shares it with people all over the world who come to visit with her. Nizreen's family has lived in Bethlehem, in that area around Bethlehem, for more than 1,500 years. She can trace her family back 15 generations, and her family is among the very first Christians in the entire world. And she told Anna that she knows the story of Jesus eating with his disciples, not because someone read the story out of the Bible to her. She learned this story from her parents and her grandparents and great grandparents around a meal table who would tell the story from memory because their parents and grandparents and great grandparents had shared the story around the table from memory. Her family has told this story for generations. But not only does she tell this story, she lives this story because her meal table is always open to everyone, like me. And a lot of people visit her, and there's always more food on her table than you can possibly eat when you enter their home. She calls her family living stones. Many people travel to the Holy Land to visit the ancient stones, right? But often they don't come to learn about Jesus' ancestors that live there right now. So they call themselves the living stones, and they want to not only tell the story of Jesus, but they want to have an open table and live this story every single day. And she lives out her story by sharing her table and her home and her food and her time with people like my daughter Anna and with people like me who want to live and work and learn about Jesus. So, First Communion students, tonight as you gather around Pastor Matthew around this altar table, guess what? We are also called to sow seeds of love and grace. And what Nizreen would want you to know, and what Pastor Matthew would want you to know, is that every time you gather around that table, we get to taste and see that there's always more than enough with Jesus because all are welcome to God's table. All are welcome to God's table. And we learn at this table that there is nothing that can separate us from the love of God. So, we are called to be generous with our time and with people, all people, even people who are different than us. We're called to be generous with our food and our time and our compassion and our grace. Every time I set my table at home with Grandma Verna's dishes at Easter and other times of the year, I don't just set these plates out because they're pretty. I set them out because when I do, I hear the stories and laughter that I've heard for generations around those tables. And I remember how I felt when she welcomed me for the first time and set a plate before me and welcomed me and made me feel like I belonged to that family. So every time you gather around this table with the bread and the wine, we hear the story that has been shared for generations, and we remember that Jesus is present with us and that we belong at that table. No matter what we bring that to that table, our fears, our doubts, our sin, our insecurity, our mistakes, we belong there because Jesus says you belong there. And it's here where all of us are fed and we are forgiven. And there will always, always be enough at the table of the Lord. So may we all strive to make our tables welcome and open. And may all of our tables be really, really long. And may they be crowded, really crowded, with all kinds of people where we can share the love and grace of Jesus, filling people with laughter and love and grace. Amen.
My name is Penelope, and I'm in 5th grade. Will you please pray with me? Dear God, there are people around the world who are dying because they are hungry and are waiting for food to eat. They do not care how much food they get or how little food they get. We need your help. Be with the people who are suffering from hunger, those who are being generous, and those who are working hard to feed as many people as they can.
Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer.
Dear God, There are a lot of places in the country that are suffering from floods and disasters. Please help the people who are trying to build new homes and the people who are trying to get back to normal.
Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer.
Dear God, be with the people in our community who are feeling scared or nervous. Please help them feel confident and safe.
Lord, in your mercy.
Dear God, bless the kids who are receiving their first communion tonight. Help them believe in God and grow with their relationships with God.
Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer.
Dear God, St. Andrew Lutheran Church is a church filled with nice people. Bless the people in our church so that they can keep deepening their relationship with you.
Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you for listening to this worship podcast of St. Andrew Lutheran Church. We hope that this recording provides you with a moment of God's grace wherever this finds you. Any contribution you make to St. Andrew will bolster our ministry and outreach, including our podcasting directly to you. You can do so online. Thank you for joining us for this podcast, and I wish you every blessing from Christ today.